I grew up chasing engines, but the day I realized the test drive was the best part, the road claimed me. At 20, I was a truck driver, diesel in my lungs, wind in my face. Then Pennsylvania flipped the rule book. 3 months to get a CDL or park it for good. Fred's eyes were ice. You getting it? You paying? No truck to test in, no lifeline, just a loophole in the fine print and a deadline burning my gut. I watched dawn spill over a DMV line wrapped around the block, white-knuckled a dash to a closing firehouse door, heart pounding like a Jake break. 2 weeks to choose, bend or break. If you've seen me online before, you know my life has either smelled like diesel or sounded like it. Trucking and wrench turning have been my entire adult world, and honestly, most of it comes down to compliance and, when necessary, a little malicious compliance. In high school, I went to tech school for auto mechanics because that's all I ever wanted since I was a kid. I loved engines, the rhythm of tools clicking, the calm in diagnosing something that wouldn't speak back. Right after graduation, I went straight into a shop. The work didn't bother me, the grease in my cuticles, the clang of impact wrenches, but I hated the shop itself. Every day, the best moment was the test drive. Those few minutes outside the shop were like fresh air after holding your breath too long. So I started thinking, if the best part of my day is the drive, why not make the drive my day? A steering wheel felt like freedom, like a full lung of air. I made it my goal to become a truck driver, and I chipped away at it like a stubborn bolt. Soon after my 20th birthday, I slid into a driver's seat for real and started getting paid to chase the open road. I loved it immediately. The hiss of the brakes, the hum under my feet, the feeling that each sunrise was mine alone. Back then, Pennsylvania used the Class 1, 2, and 3 system. Class 1 meant 18-wheelers, Class 2 meant the big boys over 30,000 pounds, and Class 3 was just passenger vehicles. The company had 2 delivery trucks, and I was driver number 2. Simple gig, good routes, and I liked the crew. Everything felt smooth, like a steady drive in top gear, but I had no idea what was coming next. About 3.5 years after I started, Pennsylvania switched to the federal commercial driver's license. The letters replaced the numbers, A for 18-wheelers, B for other trucks over 27,000 pounds, and C for passenger vehicles. Class 3 and Class C could run on a regular driver's license. Anything else needed extra testing and the right CDL. And to make it official, you needed time behind the wheel with a licensed driver, a truck to test in, and the guts to take the driving test before the written test that finalized your license. That sounded straightforward, until it didn't. I had a problem. I didn't know a single CDL driver who'd let me practice, and there was no one willing to lend me a truck to test in. The only other option was trucking school. At 20, living on my own and counting coins to make rent, that wasn't just difficult, it was impossible. Our trucks had been rated as Class 3 because they didn't have air brakes and weighed 28,000 pounds. Management chose that so they could pay drivers less. With the federal system, those same trucks were now Class B. Suddenly, my job required a CDL I didn't have and couldn't afford to chase. Let me introduce the cast. There's me, 20 and hungry. There's Fred, about 40, a part owner with eyes like a scanner for mistakes. And there's John, my manager, early 30s, practical and steady. He kept the wheels turning under Fred's watch. Pennsylvania set a 3-month deadline to get your CDL. If you didn't have it, you didn't drive. Guy under Fred's watch. Pennsylvania set a 3-month deadline to get your CDL. If you didn't have it, you didn't drive. One day, John asked me, "Are you get your CDL?" I said, "I don't know. Is the company going to pay for it?" He shrugged. "I don't know. Let me talk to Fred." I kept working, and the clock kept ticking. I was their only driver at that point. I had great relationships with everyone, co-workers, customers, the whole network. Everyone except Fred. From his first day buying into the company a year earlier, he seemed to have a problem with me. He always assumed I was doing something wrong, even when he couldn't quite prove it. No small talk, no smile, just clipped orders and quick exits. A month passed with no answer. Then one day, Fred finally asked, "Are you going to get your CDL?" I met his eyes and asked, "Are you paying for it?" "No," he said flatly. Then "No," I said, just as flat. He blinked like he didn't expect me to say it out loud. Another month rolled by. We had the exact same conversation. Only this time, he added, "What are you going to do for work?" I looked him straight in the face and said, "This isn't the only job." Silence stretched like a strap pulled tight, but he had no idea what was coming next. Here's what I knew. In just over 2 weeks, without someone like me driving, they wouldn't be able to deliver anything. They'd be forced to hire a new driver for a lot more money. If they didn't fix it, they risked losing around 85% of their business. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't argue. I just let the math do the talking. With almost 2 weeks left on the deadline, John came to me again. "Saturday," he said, "take the company pickup to Harrisburg and get your permit. You'll be paid for your time." He had the tone of a man trying to put out a fire without waking the neighbors. I nodded, already 2 moves ahead. A few weeks earlier, I'd learned something wild. If you'd driven the same truck for 3 years, you could get a waiver for the driving portion. With the right affidavit signed by the company owner, you could skip the road test, get your permit, then take the written test and walk out with your CDL. No borrowed truck. No awkward favors. I didn't tell Fred any of that. Instead, I went to the other owner, the one who trusted me, and got that affidavit signed. One quiet signature, a steady breath, and I knew the whole game had just changed, but I had no idea how hard the next step would hit. Saturday, I was on the road by 4 a.m., the company pickup humming like a patient dog. I pulled into the Harrisburg DMV by 5:30 or 6. Then I saw it. The line ran out the door and around the block, a human snake curling into the dawn. I did the math and figured I'd be about 500th when the doors opened at 7 a.m. People leaned on walls sipping coffee, breathing into their hands, shuffling in place. 2.5 hours later, I walked out with my permit. It felt like holding a key I'd been told I couldn't have. Now it was time for the test. But getting a seat to take it would be another battle entirely. Pennsylvania had set up CDL testing sites in firehouses, one in every county, to handle the flood of people. It was a smart move, but it still wasn't enough. I tried 3 different sites. Each one closed its line before I even made it through the door. That's when my office started calling around for me, trying to wedge me into a time slot anywhere. I kept the phone on loud and the tank full. On Thursday afternoon, I got the call. "You've got 1 hour to get to a testing site," they said. "Your seat's reserved." One problem, I was an hour and a half away. I didn't think, I just drove. I bent a few laws, hugged corners tighter than I should have, and watched the clock with my pulse. I just drove. I bent a few laws, hugged corners tighter than I should have, and watched the clock with my pulse. I pulled up as they were closing the doors and slipped inside with 2 seconds to spare. Fluorescent lights buzzed. Folding chairs scraped tile. I was the last one in, catching my breath as I found a seat. I came in planning to take 2 tests. Then I looked at the list of endorsements and changed my mind on the spot. To get a CDL, you had to pass the general knowledge and the air brake test. But there were endorsements too: tanker, school bus, passenger, those long articulated buses that bend in the middle, doubles and triples, and the hazmat test. I'd shown up to take 2. But once I sat down, I decided to take every test except hazmat. Sometimes momentum grabs you by the shoulders and pushes you forward. I figured if opportunity swung the door open, I might as well step all the way through. I was the last person to sit down with a stack of tests. Minutes later, I was the first one to stand up and walk out. As I passed, I heard a guy whisper to his friend, "I guess he failed." I pretended not to hear, but my heart kept time with my footsteps. In the back of the room, a computer graded the tests right away. 80 was passing, and I watched the screen like it was a scoreboard with my entire life in the balance. The results flashed one by one. I passed them all, and my lowest score was an 87. I walked out calmer than I felt, and I wasn't done yet. Saturday would be the final push. Same plan that weekend: company pickup, early run to Harrisburg. Only this time I left at 3 a.m. Good thing I did. When I arrived, I was still around 300th in line. 2 hours after getting inside, I stepped back into the light with my CDL in my wallet. The line behind me stretched past 1,500 people and kept growing. A wave of tired faces and determined eyes. Over those 2 weeks, I logged around 25 hours of overtime. I secured my CDL, and when Monday rolled around, I had a pay raise. I showed up ready to work with a license that made me untouchable in the best way. Compliance achieved on my terms. I stayed with the company for another year, but the road kept calling, and I answered. I drove trucks for 11 more years. Eventually, I moved into diesel work. The smell of fuel never really left, only the kind of conversations I had with engines. Having a CDL was a golden key in that world. It pushed me to the front of lines, bumped up my starting pay, and opened doors in shops that wouldn't have looked twice otherwise. More than once, I was the only tech in the building legally allowed to test drive a truck. That meant trust, responsibility, and enough leverage to keep my head above water. Looking back, the whole thing was a masterclass in quiet leverage. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten. I just followed the rules exactly and let the rules do the heavy lifting for me. And if you think that finally made Fred smile, well, that's a story for another day. I can still feel those pre-dawn drives to Harrisburg and the weight of Fred's silence on my shoulders. What began as compliance, deadlines, and forms became quiet leverage, built from miles, paperwork, and knowing what I'd earned. That license didn't just keep me working, it opened doors for years, from the open road to shop bays where I was the one who could take the wheel. I didn't just get a CDL, I got the power to choose my own lane.